Experimenting with photography. Scenic photography or natural photography. So scenic or natural. I wanted to share with you a little bit of photography history here. Back in 1826, the first known permanent photography, the permanent photo was taken. And it was taken by a French chemist, and his name was actually Joseph Nicephore Niepce. And this French chemist actually took about an 8-hour time to expose this photo, and it was in full daylight. So his scene required 8 hours of time of exposure in full daylight, and it was a view of the courtyard outside his lab. And you can see it here. We have a picture of the chemist on the left and then a picture of that very first permanent photo that was documented, like I said, in 1826. So here we go with the start of scenic or natural photography. Now there are a few rules for composing landscapes. Number 1, simplicity. The art of reducing your picture only to the elements that are needed to illustrate your idea. I can't stress simplicity enough. I'm going to say it one more time. The art of reducing your picture only to the elements that are needed to illustrate your idea. So you want to avoid the extra subject matter, the extraneous stuff out in that composition, not needed, and that's what clutters your photo and degrades it. So you can eliminate confusion and you can draw the attention to the most important part of your photo or your picture. So simplicity in my scale, my book, I would say simplicity is probably the number 1 rule, not only in scenic or natural photography, but all the photography. The second we're going to talk about is choosing a center. So you always want to have a main subject that captures the eye. We have a visual hierarchy. The first thing we look at is the highest, the second thing, the third thing, and on down. So we need to make sure that we have a very strong focal point. We have a point of emphasis. Now we're talking about some of those design elements and principles that we talked about earlier with composition. So make sure that choosing a center, that you have something that captures the eye. Now, does this have to be in the center? Probably not. When we talk about rule of thirds and the golden mean or the golden ratio or an S-curve, we tend to actually not like things right in the center. So because I'm saying choosing a center doesn't mean right there in the middle of the photo is my most important thing. No. We're talking about having some point of interest, something that captures the eye. The rule of thirds. Here we go. Just mentioned it. Placing those interesting objects at positions that are located about a third from the top, bottom, and either side of the picture. And this just makes our images more interesting than ones that are placed, like we said, in the dead center. Placing that center of attention in the dead center is not always good. Not saying it's terrible, because it works sometimes. A lot of amateurs do it, right? When we think about what grandma wanted us to do or what mom and dad wanted us to do when they're taking the picture, right smack dab in the middle. That's not always the case. Lines. Again, this is one of those elements that we talked about earlier. Objects in our pictures can be arranged in straight or curving lines, and that leads the eye to the center of interest. And it often does that in a very appealing way. So it's not that I have to have actual drawn lines. We can have objects that sort of imply a linear path. Okay, so think about the lines, whether it's a line of trees, a fence, a road. Maybe it's just a movement that's indicating a linear curve. Balance. So as human beings, we like balance. Our bodies are balanced. The chair you're sitting in is balanced. The table is balanced. We eat a balanced diet. We balance our checkbook. So we like balance. It's all around us. But in photographs, we really enjoy looking at photos that are evenly balanced with interesting objects on both sides, rather than having everything located on one side or another, and then nothing on the other side. So we're talking about the visual balance, the composition, and how you visually balance it. Not to say, again, we don't want to put everything smack dab in the middle. So you need to think about asymmetrical balance. It's not going to be equal on either side or top to bottom, but it's going to feel right. And you'll know when you look at it that it feels right. If it doesn't feel right, think again about the balance. Framing. I actually have seen some of you do some framing probably without even knowing it. So framing the elements in a photograph, they tend to create a frame within a frame to highlight the center of interest. So a lot of times if you have a tree, you have a trunk of a tree and you have branches. So that sort of frames in, it kind of draws that point of interest to a central point or a focus point. So you can use framing by how you position or compose your photo with the elements. Okay, so it's kind of a frame within a frame. Fusion or separation. So it's important to ensure that two unrelated objects don't merge in a way that you don't intend. Like the classic example of a tree growing out of the top of someone's head. Can be kind of fun. You see some silly photography where, you know, they're trying to look like they're balancing something in their hand, and what's they're balancing is actually many, many miles behind them. But you have to make sure that it's intended. You don't want to, you know, position somebody and it looks like something's coming out of their head, or, you know, something is going to, it just looks unprofessional, it looks uneasy. So make sure that you don't have some sort of fusion going on where things are seemingly merging together. Color and texture. So the hues, the contrast between light and dark, the texture of an image. This is all very important. It's a very important part of composition. So the eye can be attracted to bright colors. It can be lulled by muted colors. We think bright colors come towards us. Duller, desaturated colors go away from us. We're excited by vivid contrast. The most vivid contrast comes from those complementary colors. So think about color and texture when you are composing and putting together your photography.